Ayo, Ben here, and welcome back to Election Prediction. I'm recording this Thursday before the final day of the RNC, the festivities at the RNC kickoff, and I'm going to tell you, I've been watching the RNC. Wow. To all the people saying the Republicans are not unified, that's simply not true. There are a few higher ups who are not unified, but for the most part, they're unified. And the other thing that I've been noticing is that, they're fighting back against the media. They're fighting back against. They're actually not just taking the crap that the media keeps throwing at them. And to the people who are saying that Melania Trump plagiarized her speech, I'm going to tell you this. Look at the transcript and then highlight the parts that were getting the criticism. 2 lines out of a 17-minute speech. That's not enough to constitute plagiarism. And the other thing, you also have to not only use similar words and similar patterns, but you also have to copy the intent, the sentiment behind the words. And the sentiments were completely different. If you listen to them, you will find that. If you listen to the 2 parts between Melania Trump and Michelle Obama's speeches, you'll find that the sentiments were completely different. Now, to my good friend Severe Weather Channel, I'm going to call him a friend because he's well engaged. He actively participates, and he asks fair questions whenever it seems I'm leaning too far towards Trump. Like I said, I'm a libertarian. I endorse Gary Johnson. I'm going to be voting for him. Currently, I'm actually in Virginia, a swing state. And I'm in one of the Republican congressional districts, even though I'm actually closer, thank you gerrymandering by the way, even though I'm closer to to some Democrat districts. And if it were less gerrymandered, I'd probably be in a Democrat district. But originally, I'm actually a Georgia boy. And let me put it this way. There is zero way that Clinton wins Georgia. And the reason why, and I'm actually going to move it into safe, just like I'm going to move Mississippi into safe. But here's the reason why a Democrat won't win Georgia. Definitely not this year. 2020, perhaps 2020. But still, 2024 would be the soonest date that I could reasonably see, unless things significantly change. And the main reason is Atlanta does not outweigh the rest of the state. The vast majority of the state of Georgia is extremely conservative, regardless of race, believe it or not. Once you get outside of Atlanta and outside of some of the suburbs, because, for example, Kennesaw is pretty much a Republican stronghold. It's a town of about 50,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are a lot of other towns like that. Peachtree City, and these are all suburbs of Atlanta. And once you get outside of Atlanta and Macon, the rest of the state is deep red. Savannah, for example, pretty conservative. Even the college town of Statesboro, Georgia, is pretty damn conservative. As a matter of fact, Bullock County, where Georgia Southern University it goes red most of the time. And here's the other thing: even with extremely high African American turnout for Barack Obama in both 2008 and 2012. By the way, 2008 he was closer to winning Georgia than he was in 2012, even though the population went, even though the electoral votes went up for the state, and I believe actually African American voter share turned out a little bit higher in Georgia. He was actually further away for winning Georgia than he was in '08. And this is partially the thing. Yes, African American voters vote more Democrat than normal, but if you're in but the African American vote in super conservative areas tends to be more conservative. It only makes sense. If you are constantly around conservatives, you're going to be more conservative. And if you're around left-leaners, I don't want to use the word liberal simply because it doesn't mean what it used to mean anymore. It used to mean for individual liberty and for small government. Believe it or not, that's actually what liberal used to mean. Now it means Big Brother taking care of your every need. But yeah, if you hang out with a bunch of left-leaners, it's more likely that you're going to be a left-leaner. It's the simple truth of the matter. Now, let's look at Oregon. And if you look at the counties, I'm not really going to go into it too far. And the same thing actually goes for Washington, except Washington has a higher population than Seattle, Tacoma, which means it's going to go blue. I still think Oregon's going to go blue, but it's closer this year. Oregon is a very rural state. Really, all you have is Portland and Salem. Eugene is not that big a town. It's a college town, but it's not that big. And Salem is a Republican stronghold, kind of like Orange County in California is a Republican stronghold. I believe it's Staten Island in New York City that's a Republican stronghold. But Oregon, if you flip only a few counties, could very easily go red. I'm not sure, I can't remember which counties, but let's say voter turnout is not good in Eugene, which is like I said, it's a college town, by the way, which is very important because we might see something very weird happen, which is a college town in a supposedly left-leaning area going red. And that's partially because once you get outside of that college town specifically, again, it's very rural in Oregon. And quite honestly, Oregon is one of the states that I'm watching, along with Connecticut. But I'm going to say we're going to go with past behavior in this case. Nevada. I recently saw a poll showing Trump up by 17% in the bellwether Washoe County, otherwise known as Reno. Basically, that would indicate that he's going to win the state. He was up by, which means if he's up by a huge amount in Washoe County, it means he's going to win the sate. And I saw quite a few of these other supposed bellwether counties in this poll. I believe it was conducted by Pew. I'm going to have to find it and give it to y'all next week, the survey company that did it, but it was a reputable one. It wasn't it wasn't like an internal poll or a Ipsos poll or even a Rasmussen poll, which I trust Rasmussen, but I do account for the fact that they have a definite Republican lean. For example, Trump's not leading by 7% nationally, no matter what Rasmussen says. I believe he was up 4 or 2. Those were reasonable leads, but 7's a bit too far, in my opinion, at this stage of the race. Utah, it's going to go red. The only reason why I include it is because both Hillary and Clinton are even more unpopular in Utah. Both Clinton and Trump are so unpopular in Utah that Johnson has a significant, a reasonable chance of winning it. Which would create some really interesting things. Arizona, it's going red. I do not think it's going to go blue. Trump has a significant lead in Georgia. Well, he has a significant lead in Georgia, but he has a significant lead in Arizona. And not only that, but he's got significant figures in Arizona supporting him, like Sheriff Joe Arpaia. And not only that, but again, there are a few areas that are liberal in Arizona, but the vast majority of the state is conservative. And again, this entire heartland region, which I'm going to call this part of the Western heartland, they're really big on their guns, and not just for hunting, okay? A lot of people love to say, oh, they like their guns because they're a hunting region. Yes, they're a hunting region. But they also like their guns because there's the prevailing feeling of get the hell out of my life. And that's the other reason why they have guns and why they love their guns, is it's not about hunting and sporting. It's about self-defense, including from the government. Okay? Nevada, the other reason why I want to paint it red is because they also have the largest machine gun festival in the United States. And you heard that correctly. Yes, largest machine gun festival. Where everybody takes their machine guns to a place in the desert and blows through at least $30,000 worth of ammunition a day for the entirety of this festival. It's kind of one place I'd love to go just because, hey, machine guns are cool. They don't call them fun switches for nothing. The select fire lever. And they're a great investment, okay? They are actually a great investment because they don't go down in value. So, yes, they have more purpose than just killing. And I'm going to take a quick tangent to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment, which the court has redefined in a case this year. I forget the name of the lady, but it was against the state of Massachusetts, where Massachusetts had a stun gun ban. They basically said the stun gun ban was unconstitutional as it violated the right to keep and bear arms. And the Supreme Court has repeatedly, since the 1930s, ruled in favor of the individual right to keep and bear arms. In the United States versus Miller, sure, they ruled the sawed-off shotgun ban constitutional, but the reason they did was because they ruled it that the Second Amendment protects the right of Americans to keep and bear arms with regards to those that are consistent with those in use by militaries around the world. Meaning, the Second Amendment protects the right of Americans to keep and bear weapons of war. Meaning, yes, they do belong on our streets, Democrats. At least according to the Supreme Court. And the Founding Fathers, who, by the way, did know of some early, I'm going to call them quote-unquote machine guns, the Belton flintlock, which, by the way, the Founding Fathers and the Continental Congress were fanboys of this gun. They were kind of like your AK-47 fanboys, or your they were fanboys of this gun, okay? The only reason they didn't get it for the Continental Army was because it was too expensive for them to do it. And here's the other thing. They didn't prohibit individual citizens from owning basically the first assault rifle. They had a chance to, but they didn't prohibit it. Therefore, we can infer that they knew the technology would advance. They knew that pretty soon this thing would become a lot more efficient, and yet they didn't prohibit it or any successors of it. There was also an air rifle that Thomas Jefferson really loved that could fire a 30 round. It was either a 30 or a 20 round magazine in about 5 seconds. So yes, the founding fathers knew that technology would improve. They knew that eventually you'd be able to put a lot of lead down range very quickly, and yet they didn't prohibit citizens from owning these firearms. So yeah, the Second Amendment does protect the right to keep weapons suitable for use in militaries. And if we look at DC versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago, the Supreme Court has also ruled that it's an individual right that is not to be interpreted as a right that is only given when in connection with service in a state-sponsored militia, like the police force or the National Guard or the U.S. military. And here's the thing. Heller was actually a police officer in D.C., and yet he could wear a gun on his hip, yet Heller could wear a gun while on duty, but not in the home. You had to have that thing disassembled in the home. So, to put it lightly, the whole liberal argument is, and again, I don't want to call it liberal, but the whole Democrat argument that weapons of war don't belong on our streets, the Supreme Court has said, yeah, they actually do. The Founding Fathers said, yeah, they actually do. Various sources throughout the history of our country, except for those that don't like guns, have basically said, yeah, they belong there. And the other thing, and this is the thing Democrats won't tell you about gun control, is that they invented it to keep guns out of the hands of black people, to keep the guns out of the hands of African Americans. They invented gun control to suppress minorities from exercising their rights. It is historically true. Anybody who denies it is ignoring history. Gun control was a famous part of Jim Crow laws and black codes in the solid Democrat South. Okay, anyway, that's end of my rant. Like I said, I'm a libertarian. I do not agree with a lot of the socially conservative BS that the Republicans push. Hey, what happens between people in their own bedroom, what happens between consenting adults is none of my business. It's none of the government's business. That's one example. Drugs. Hey, no one should tell you what you can and cannot put into your system. But I also wouldn't say I'm socially liberal, because nowadays that means I'm for more government spending in social areas, which I'm not. The government has a very limited job that's very explicitly stated in the Constitution. As a matter of fact, if you read the 10th Amendment, it says that the federal government, any powers not expressly granted in the U.S. Constitution to the federal government is reserved for the states or the people. Anyway, moving on. New Mexico is going to go blue. It's just, again, past history. They only went red once for Bush II in 2004. Colorado I've seen polls all over the place with Trump leading by a decent amount, Hillary Clinton leading by a decent amount, and it being a neck and neck race. I've seen polls everywhere. And back to New Mexico, there is a chance Gary Johnson could win it. It is his home state, especially if he aggressively pursues it and reminds them why New Mexicans voted for this guy twice. I'm going to go ahead and put Colorado blue. That said, if Trump does say that he is all for legalizing marijuana or allowing the states to deal with it, I think he could really put himself over the top in Colorado, and it would also have an effect in Oregon and Washington State. I don't think it'd be enough to put Washington blue, or to make Washington go red, but it would definitely be enough for Oregon. And here's the thing. Why am I saying that marijuana could be the issue that helps him in the West? And it's because Hillary Clinton is not in favor of marijuana. She does not think it should be legal under any circumstances. Trump actually agrees with medical marijuana completely. For recreational, he hasn't explicitly stated it, but people have hinted that, hey, he's taking a federalist states' rights response to it. The second congressional district in Nebraska, it's going to go red, in my opinion, simply because Nebraska is a very red state. South Dakota, I don't think it's going to lean blue. Both of the Dakotas are very similar. That said, there have been times in American history where the Dakotas have split their vote. But South Dakota is very much like Montana. It's very much like Wyoming. It's very much like North Dakota. Now we get on to a lot of the fun states. Missouri, Trump is leading very much there. I don't think that it's going to flip. I mean, it could. I mean, Bill Clinton did flip a lot of the South. But Hillary is not Bill. A lot of Southerners think that Hillary is a carpetbagger, which it's not something you want to be seen as if you're in the South. Being called a carpetbagger is not a good thing. I don't see her winning any true. I don't even want to say true Southern states, but I don't see her winning any of the South. Iowa, again, it's very rural. Des Moines is going to vote blue, but I really do think that the rest of the state is going to go red, and that's going to be enough to put it over the top, especially considering that Trump has had a lead over the past couple of weeks in the polls there. We're going to return to the Rust Belt later. I meant to keep Indiana as safe red, especially with Trump picking Mike Pence as the governor, as the vice president. Yeah, sorry, I haven't slept in a few days. Work and that does that for you. North Carolina is very similar to Georgia. Outside of Raleigh and this area up in this corner of the state, outside of Raleigh in this area, it's very red. And I don't think that's going to change this cycle. And remember, 2008 was very much an anomaly that was due to high African American turnout, and I hate having to say stuff like that, but it is true. Demographically speaking, it is true. And one thing I've noticed about the Republican National Convention is that they've toned down a lot of they've actually started doing what the media says they need to do, which is, hey, go after these people. Explain how the Democrats' policies have failed in the inner cities how the Democrats poll, because a lot of people will be like, country bumpkins up in Appalachia have been voting Republican for decades, yet they're still poor. And I actually saw this on my Facebook wall, and I looked and I was like, wait a second. You do realize the inner cities have been voting Democrat for much longer than Appalachia has, and they've been poor as shit forever, and they've had a higher crime rate than Appalachia. I mean, if I'm going to be poor, I'd at least want to be safe. I don't want to be poor and in a dangerous position. But then again, no one wants to be poor. Well, except socialists. And the reason I say that is I'm an economics major. That's my area of expertise, is the economy. And I have yet, even though I've taken a lot of economics courses, I've yet to see any positive evidence for socialism. It just doesn't work. It's a great theoretical system, but the evidence says that it doesn't work. So, anyway, North Carolina, I think, is going to go red. There is a chance it could go blue. I'm not going to discount it entirely, but it could go red, especially after the RNC. It was a really well-run convention. It was not as crazy as people said. The protests were not as crazy as people said they were going to be. Florida, it's going red. And here's the other reason why I think it's going red. Besides the fact that Marco Rubio, who is at least tied, has endorsed Trump. Not all Hispanics are created equal. Florida Hispanics, by and large, are Cuban descent. And Cubans hate any sort of government intervention. They hate socialism, to put it lightly. And the reason why is most of them grew up during, or their parents grew up during, Castro's reign. And a lot of them were actually refugees at one point. And Cubans have almost always voted against socialism. That's why I say the Hispanic vote in Florida favors Republicans, is because most of those of Cuban descent are more conservative, simply because they saw what happened in Cuba with Fidel Castro and a lot of these government-run programs. They hate anything that sounds like socialism. And that's true of a lot of immigrants from socialist nations. Garry Kasparov, once world chess champion and a lot of people say the greatest chess player in the world, who was a Russian, he was getting tweets in emails and letters from a lot of Americans saying how great socialism was. And he finally got pissed enough to put it on Twitter saying, guys, I grew up in a socialist nation. It sucks. Socialism is not a good thing. Like Garry Kasparov, who, by the way, has jumped into politics. I don't know why. He really should have just stuck with what he was good at. But he does have this correct. From experience, he has said that socialism sucks. Sure, it gave him an advantage, but that was because he had a talent in one area. What if he had a talent in another area that he didn't develop until later, where he would have been an even better business owner or business manager than he would have been a chess player? Well, Guess what? The Soviet Union determined what he was going to do with the rest of his life based off of the fact that he was pretty good as a kid. Now, I'm not sure many people would complain, but the point remains that he didn't have a choice in what he was going to do. Give me just a second. Apologies about that. Just some family stuff. Okay, so I also forgot to do it like this, to where I have the leaning and the likelies. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to call it leaning, likely, solid. And both solids are tied. So far, as we're going through, Trump leads in leaning and likelies. And this is the way I'm going to rate it. Leaning is anywhere between tied and 5%. Likely is that's where the vote total is going to go. So Florida, for example, will be within 1%. Iowa is going to be within 2. North Carolina will be within 5. Georgia's going to be probably close to 10. Arizona and Missouri are going to be around 6 to 7% range. And likely is going to be 5 to 10%. Or 5.1 to 10%. And then anything over 10 is going to be solid. Now we're into where vice presidential picks will matter. So, and also certain endorsements. So, Hillary's best option is Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, which would make Virginia go blue. Though the area of Virginia I'm in, which is surprisingly close to a so-called Democrat stronghold in Virginia of Hampton Roads, it's actually possible that Virginia goes red again. But again, we're going to lean it blue right now, even without Kaine. But that would be her best option. Somebody who isn't more charismatic than her. She really should not pick a woman. Booker would be one of the worst choices because you also have to think how your ticket sounds. Clinton Booker ticket does not sound good. Because it's basically saying book her, as in put her in prison. No bueno. So Booker is out. Julian Castro from Texas. If you want to lose Florida, pick somebody whose name is Castro. Like, I'm not kidding when I say that either. So like I said, Tim Kaine is probably her best option. Sherrod Brown from Ohio, perhaps. Though she really wouldn't want to choose him because John Kasich would pick his replacement. So like I said, Tim Kaine is really her only real option. Now, moving on to New Hampshire, and that's going to lean as is this. Maine is going to be likely Hillary. The second congressional district will lean Trump this year. Now on to and Jersey is going to be likely as well. Now, Connecticut, apparently there was and I don't want to use this in my factoring, but it could show you something. Connecticut has been extremely close in the polls this year, or closer than it should be. But a Republican internal poll, which this one is rated as B, as a B grade by 538 and 8 silver. This internal pollster had Connecticut tied, and this was before the conventions. So I'm going to be watching Connecticut. Because it is continuously shown to be very close. And at least in this cycle. So it could very well go red. I'm surprised. I'm saying that, by the way. I really am. But we're going to lean it blue. And yes, I said lean. Not likely. We're leaning it blue. Now, here's the funny thing. It would definitely go red, as would Massachusetts, if Tom Brady made an official endorsement of Trump. Because that's just how much those areas worship him. I mean, sure, there are a lot of Patriots fans who will make fun of the fact that Brady likes Trump, but in the end, Brady really did bring that city to sports relevance. Pence will really help, and I think that's going to finally put it into Ohio's corner. And guess what? We're already at 270 with just Florida, Ohio, Iowa, and these 5 votes over here for Trump. Now, as for the rest of the Rust Belt, Minnesota will be blue, but it's going to be a lot closer than I think a lot of people would be expecting. Because I've seen polls where it's within the margin of error in Minnesota, with Trump only being down by 3, which means that he's actually probably a lot closer in Wisconsin, because this is kind of the way these 3 states work. Minnesota is more blue than Wisconsin, is more blue than Iowa. Iowa's somewhat red, actually. Like I said, it's one of those true toss-up states. Wisconsin is a blue-leaning swing state. Minnesota is pretty much a blue state. But this is kind of how I think it'll break down. I'm not so sure about Wisconsin. I think it's also going to be a very close state. Michigan, I actually, having looked at things a little bit more recently, I think Pence really helps in Michigan. And same thing with Pennsylvania, actually. Again, the poll with a lot of the poll I saw with a lot of the bellwether counties and some swing states, there was only one county that Trump wasn't leading, and it was close, and that one was in Colorado. Pennsylvania had their bellwether county. But this is kind of where I'm seeing the Rust Belt going. I reserve the right to change Michigan at any point. Just like I reserve the right to change Pennsylvania and Iowa. And, well, I reserve the right to change any state, but I'm very confident about Pennsylvania and Michigan. I'm very confident at this point in time about Pennsylvania and Ohio. I am also very confident about the South. Now, how does Hillary win? because I want to try and say there's a very good way that Hillary can win. It's going to be very difficult for her, but she needs to say that she needs to say something to the effects of the shooters, even though they say they were inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. She needs to say that these people, these shooters, do not represent the movement's ideals nor their methods. Though it's going to be really hard for her to do that. And if she can do that, as well as choose, like I said, Tim Kaine from Virginia, as well as prove, as well as deny the fact that she said that Australia's gun control measures would be ideal for America, which any gun owner should, not approve of that whatsoever. And, like I said, if there's a gun owner who's voting for Hillary Clinton, I'd be amazed. She also needs to prove that she's not a crook. And if she can do that and maybe conjure up some, I don't know. I really don't know, because her charisma is terrible. It really is. Trump has, I don't want to say it because it's going to say, oh, well, it's confirming that he's just like this person. But it's hard to compare the levels of charisma he has to anyone from history other than everyone's favorite dictator. And there I go, breaking Godwin's law. But yeah, no. It's going to be very difficult for Hillary, but her path is much easier. Basically, what she has to do is hold Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan, as well as all she has to do is hold the Rust Belt. She can lose this vote. She can lose these votes. She can lose New Hampshire. She can lose Nevada, Arizona. All she has to do is hold 3 states that I am currently giving to Trump: Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Actually, all she has to do is hold Ohio and Pennsylvania. But this is where I think the election stands after the RNC. But yeah, this is where I think it will be. I'm not sure the DNC is going to be as popular or resonate as well, because the RNC actually resonated fairly well with independents. Technically, I'm considered an independent, even though I'm a libertarian. It resonated quite well with me, especially after I decided to look up facts, especially after Christie's mock indictment of Clinton. I looked up the facts, and the New York Times did as well, and the New York Times said, yeah, you're right. You actually were right, Christie. But yeah. So this is where I'm seeing the race. Don't be too surprised if Wisconsin and Minnesota and Virginia go red. But I wouldn't bet on those. So this is what I'm seeing right now. Anyway, thank you guys. See you next time.